and welcome to the Daily Roto NBA Daily Fantasy Show here on dailyroto.com. I'm Davis Maddock, joined by Christopher Pacheco. We got a 6-game slate in the association tonight. We have some legit cues going on. Now, Domantas Sabonis is out for the Indiana Pacers, but we are waiting on a bunch of dudes. Jeremy Lamb, Goga Batadze. I believe they have one other questionable in there as well. Pacheco, which we will get to in just a second. But then huge questions with the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic, questionable. Porzingis didn't play last night as an injury precaution. I believe he is listed as questionable as well. Dorian Finney-Smith listed on the injury report. We could get... Now, here's the thing, Pacheco, with the Mavericks stuff. If these guys are close to playing, they're going to play tonight because this game is massive for Dallas in terms of seeding. And not only that, so we have Luka for 35 minutes, Porzingis for 33. I think we could see, and we've talked about this a bunch when I've been on these shows with you over the last weeks, these huge seeding games. I think we're going to, at least in the ranges of outcomes, are these guys playing loads of minutes. Are you leaning any specific way right now on the Dallas guys?
Well, first things is first. You should refresh your projections because Porzingis is no longer in them.
There we go.
He's doubtful. He's doubtful to play tonight. So the official cues right now for Dallas are Luka, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Maxi Kleber, who yesterday it seemed like he got hurt, played 9 minutes, and never came back. And I cannot imagine him being healthy yesterday and playing just 9 minutes. So I'm very confident that he actually got hurt. He seems pretty iffy for tonight. I am in agreement with you here. This feels like a spot where they got to play Luka. He popped up with the same injury yesterday on the injury report, and he ended up playing. And the line right now is, it's actually favoring Golden State by quite a bit. When I did this yesterday, the V0s, the game essentially was tilting in Dallas's favor by 1 point. So to me, that kind of signifies that Vegas is expecting some rest coming out of Dallas tonight. And it's not just Porzingis. It could also be Luka. But my lean right now would be Luka playing. It's too big of a game. This is also a massive game for Golden State as well, Davis. They are very well positioned to be in the play-in tournament.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with this first game. The Trailblazers favored by 5.5 against the Indiana Pacers. So we do not have Domantas Sabonis tonight for the Indiana Pacers. That's going to leave a lot of minutes for, well, I guess it depends. If Goga Batadze plays, I would imagine that they return him to the starting lineup. Now, O'Shea Brissett has actually been pretty good. Now, he's 6'7", so not exactly the dude you want going up against Nurk and Enes Kanter. So I would imagine they start Batadze. But, 2 weeks ago, having this conversation about the Pacers, I would have said, Batadze's playing 33 minutes. He's getting it in. He's going to be best value on the slate. Now I could see 29 minutes, 30 minutes with the rates not being that great, especially if he shared the court with Brissett. Not that I think Brissett is like, Michael Jordan reincarnated or anything, but he has been pretty decent. What are some of the ways we can see the Pacers rotation falling out? And do we like anyone other than Brogdon and Brissett? The way we have the rotation plugged out now, because you have Batadze in right now.
Yes.
But obviously Brissett, I think, would be pretty strong if Batadze did not play.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. As you mentioned, the matchup against Nurk, he's no longer playing low 20s minutes either, right? So his minutes limit is now non-existent. He's playing 29 and a half. He's about to play 30 here probably on any given night. It sets up as a really, really difficult matchup for Indiana if Goga can't give it a go. They just don't have size on their roster. So they really need Goga to go out there tonight and play minutes in the 20s. But I also think on the flip side of that, I think Brissett could also just start next to Goga at the 4. which I think is probably the most likely scenario if that happens in terms of if Goga can play. If Goga can play, I think Jakar Sampson probably just starts again and tries to do something against Nurkic. Not that he will do anything effectively against them, but I think that's probably the scenario we're headed for. And at this point, I feel very confident in saying that Brissett has just leapfrogged someone like Jakar Sampson in the pecking order there in Indiana. So if we don't get Goga, I feel confident in Brissett playing over 30 minutes. That's what's happened here lately with a very, very similar rotation without Goga out there and Sabonis and Turner. So I think that's what's going to happen here. As far as DFS plays, I think Brogdon, his rates have been fantastic without Sabonis out there, better than LeVert's, frankly, here in this stretch run. Also, Indiana is in 9th seed right now in the Eastern Conference, and Washington is just right behind them. So this is also a really big game for them. So, I'm expecting a big game out of Brogdon. I think LeVert is in a playable range, though I do prefer Brogdon over him. I think Goga, if he can give it a go, I think would be interesting. I think he'd be in a playable range at his price tag. He's just 4K on DraftKings. And then Brissett would be viable if Goga can't give it a go. I don't think he'd be much of a play, even at 29 minutes, if Goga can give it a go. Yeah,
I'm with you there. My one thought for tournaments on the Pacers would be I'm jamming Goga if he starts, even though we have a very high ownership projection on him. I don't really care. He's been so good when he started, and also just in general, it's easier for center value plays to get there than it is for your Brian Goodwins of the world, because there's a difference between making shots and gobbling up rebounds, and stocks is just a little bit easier to do those things as a big my one thing would be LeVert versus Brogdon. Brogdon going to be about 20% owned, and LeVert is going to be single digits. Obviously, if Brogdon has an off game, it's going to be bigger on LeVert. Those guys are directly negatively correlated.
Yes.
So that's where I'm at there. On the Portland side of the ball, I think all of Dame, CJ, and Nurk are strong plays, especially because they are all now being projected at the upper range of their minutes outcomes, which I think you did a good job with, because it's time to stop messing around for the Blazers now. Those games that Dame missed, not good for them. They are dangerously close. If the Mavericks win tonight and the Blazers lose, they will be tied in record. Now, I don't know who owns the tiebreaker between them, but the Blazers are going to be slipping into that play-in arena, which they do not obviously want to be in. So we're just going to see huge minutes for Dame, CJ. Nurk is going to play as many minutes as he can. Now, Norm, I think, is interesting on DraftKings. Obviously, he's expensive at 6,300, but again, I mean, Norm's substitutes on the bench is like Carmelo and Derek Jones Jr., not guys they want to be playing big minutes. So I think Norm is a little bit is a good MME dart. But I think all three of the top Blazers guys are all really strong plays.
You couldn't have said it any better in terms of Portland tonight. I mean, they really are 7th in the Western Conference right now. It's frankly mind-boggling. Given all the great games that Dame had earlier in the season. I know they've been banged up, which is always a story of the Blazers. It feels like every year, but I'm sorry. There's no reason they should be sitting in 7th with all that talent. With that said, Davis, don't look at this. I want you to just take a wild guess. What do you think their team total is tonight?
The Blazers team total?
Yeah.
Without looking, I'll guess 111.
Okay. What if I told you it was 124? Would you believe it?
Do the Pacers even play that fast? Like, I don't even think of them as a running. Like, what do you think is feeding into that total?
Just the fact that Indiana's interior defense is horrid. I mean, they don't have anybody. Right? In terms of Miles Turner being a stopgap down there, blocking shots. So it's not that Sabonis is a great defender, but at least he's tall. They just don't have dudes down there, and Portland is at full strength. Frankly, I was a little bit surprised by the total as well. But I'm not going to question Vegas either. It's a monstrous total. You have to like CJ, Dame, Nurkic in the spot. I think they're certainly in play. I don't know about playing, 3 of them. I'd probably just max 2 on the 6-gamer. Dame and CJ, I probably wouldn't play together still. I could see myself playing Nurkic in one of the guards, but not both. The thing that I have against Powell, by the way, is that his rates are not very good next to all these dudes. And so could he still get there? Yes, it would require a really efficient night. And he's playing good minutes. It's just that the rates are just not there.
Yeah. All right, moving on to the Oklahoma City Thunder at the Boston Celtics. Boston resting Kemba tonight, and then is Tatum rest or illness? It doesn't matter. Either way, he's not playing. Yeah. So the very interesting thing to me is that we have Robert Williams out in the projections right now. I think he's missed 3 games in a row. He's listed as questionable. Obviously, Boston is not in the position of wanting to lose games. Not a tough opponent here. They are favored by 11 points without Tatum and Kemba against the Oklahoma City Blue, basically the G League team right now. But Robert Williams, if he plays, I have to imagine is pretty strong. The shitty thing, really, about the Celtics Pacheco is Fournier, Jabari Parker, Semi Ojeleye, Romeo Langford. These guys are zeros. Romeo Langford played 32 minutes the other night and got 5 DraftKings points.
Yeah.
All of the DFS scoring is going to come from Jalen Brown, Marcus Smart, Tristan Thompson, and Robert Williams if he plays, and that's it. There's not anyone else. I mean, maybe Jabari, who is 3,300. Now, if they start Jabari, which I don't think they will, I think they will start Semi and Langford. But if they started Jabari, because Jabari's he's just the better scorer off the bench or whatever. But if they did start Jabari, that would move his minute projection from 15 to like 24, 25. Got to think he would be a pretty decent-ish MME dart. But for the Celtics, I mean, Jalen, you're playing Jalen and cash almost for sure. We have him projected for 55% ownership. So a semi-decent game theory fade there. But then the guy, I mean, obviously the guy we love here, Marcus Smart, 6,600. Just he is a total jam. When you add in and James here, our guy James Malloy, there we go. Robert Williams already announced out. So Marcus Smart, he's just gonna crush, dude. Smart and Brown are just 2 of the best plays of the whole slate.
Yeah, so Rob Williams has already been ruled out. That's the reason why we're tilting the projection on Thompson's favor. But his time is running out. I think Williams is probably going to be back tomorrow. They're just doing their due diligence, resting their guys, making sure they're healthy, and playing them in a better game environment tomorrow. Because I'm sorry, Davis, but on the other side, your boys aren't really trying. Although Lou Dort is going to be out there, so I'm really interested there. But they're just horrific. But you nailed Boston. Absolutely nailed them. If they start Langford and Semi, it's gross. They don't do anything. They just don't do anything for DFS. I would much rather see Jabari start and have. Frankly, I'm going to be honest with you. I think Jabari is already in a playable range in this slate. Even if he doesn't start, I think you got to give that a shot because Boston can be in a situation where Langford and Semi are just not producing, and Jabari just gets extended run off the bench or closes to halves or something like that. I think that's very much in play. So I already think you can take some stabs at Jabari in MME. And I think Jalen Brown and Marcus Smart are the plays here. They're absolutely the plays. Fournier came back, but he had COVID and he looks lost.
He looks so bad. Yeah.
I don't think he's made a shot, but I think he's gone 0 for 10 both games that he's been back. He's just looked horrific. Doesn't look like he belongs right now, unfortunately, for Boston. So the offense is just going to roll through Jalen and Marcus Smart. The big question mark there is, can OKC make it competitive? Because that is the one thing that I think can screw Brown and Smart from these big projections. If it's a competitive game, I don't see many routes where they fail.
Yeah. So on Oklahoma City, the only two guys I think are playable are Point Dort and Darius Baisley. They haven't been letting Pokasevsky get into the low 30s in minutes since he returned from that game he left after like 8 minutes, and they said it was for illness or whatever.
Yeah.
They haven't been letting him get into the minutes he would need to pay off this price tag. And then Roby and Moses Brown and Tony Bradley are splitting the minutes in such a way that none of them are any good for DFS. You know, Theo just is not good enough. You know, all due respect to the guy, he just is not good enough. Not now playing next to SGA with Horford, it was a little bit different. He could make a little bit more, but just it's not going to do it here. Dort's going to have his hands on the ball this whole game, I would think. I think his rates are looking pretty good. I think his minutes look good, and him and Baisley both I think look like good tournament plays. And Dort has been, putting up these games where he's been shooting a ton. He's had like over 20 field goal attempts in a bunch of these games, and he still is only like 4 or 5% owned. Obviously, he's not a very good shooter, but these shots can go in. Like, dude's taking 20 shots a night. Like, if those shots go in, you're gonna want them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this is a 2-horse race here between Dort and Baisley, and frankly, I just have more interest in Dort. Listen, it's risky. These plays don't come without risk. OKC has absolutely nothing to play for. If they're getting blown out, do I see Dort playing more than 30 minutes? No, probably not. I guess the good thing about OKC is they've just been playing 10 guys no matter what. But if it is an ugly blowout, they'll probably extend and play like Charlie Brown Jr., the real player, by the way, and some other random. So that's a risk, but I think it's worth it. At these ownership numbers that I'm seeing for Dort, I would jump all over it, especially if you're running Smart and Jalen Brown together tonight. I do think that you probably want to run back an OKC player. Because there's just no way that Brown and Smart get there together if the game is a blowout. So if it's competitive, I see them getting there, and I see an OKC guy getting there, and my guess is that would be Dort.
Yeah. All right, Milwaukee at Charlotte, 9-point spread here. Obviously, Giannis, one of the highest projected players of the slate. Middleton and Holiday, your MME darts. I don't think either one of them are close to core plays. On the Charlotte side of the ball, their guard rotation pretty solidified, with Rozier going to handle the ball a ton in a competitive game. He gets to 40, 45 a good chunk of the time. Devontae Graham, if he could ever make a shot, would be a pretty good tournament play. He's 6,200. Their forward rotation really is a mess now, though. They're playing both Martin brothers. They're not starting Jalen McDaniels anymore. Well, they're switching between McDaniels and the worst Martin, Cody Martin. And then sometimes they're starting Vernon Carey Jr., and then sometimes they're DNP CDing him. We have Bismack playing backup center today. Obviously, it's better when PJ Washington for DFS gets those backup center minutes, but if they're playing Bismack and Vernon Carey, he is much less likely to get those minutes. This game just seems kind of gross to me.
Yeah, well, listen, I think if Charlotte's going to make a run at this, I say it often, it's Terry. It's Terry. His rates have been crazy, just crazy with Graham in, Graham out. It's just too many dudes out for Charlotte. And Terry's just doing – it feels like he's just doing it all. Graham is the one that's the least consistent of the two. So I side with Terry on this one. And then we keep having these big projections for him. And he keeps getting there in games where Charlotte is they're competing. So if they're going to make this one competitive, I think Terry's going to have to do his thing. Either that or Graham gets hot, or both, because Milwaukee's so darn good. And they're going to be at full strength tonight, it looks like. So I think Terry is still my call. Graham on FanDuel, I like it. DraftKings, I like it less. I think PJ Washington, given the minutes that he's seen as a starter of late without them playing Vernon Carey, is a little bit interesting as well. Those would be my Charlotte plays. Milwaukee, you nailed it. It's Giannis, Middleton, and Holiday. I think are interesting in MME, but I don't think I would do them in SE or 3 max in this slate. They still have the upside on a 6-gamer, in my opinion, to get there, especially if Giannis is not having a good game. I think one of those guys can step up. So I think they're playable. DiVincenzo on FanDuel 4,500, I think, is a decent enough call to do as well. And that's about it for Milwaukee.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on this game before we move on? I think that literally this is, I think, with the blowout potential and stuff, like the worst game environment of the night.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Boston and OKC is probably, frankly, I think Boston and OKC is probably the worst one.
It is, but because the guys are resting, there are just more, like you're going to want to play more guys from there. Yeah,
correct. But I do think that a couple guys stand out in this game, and if for some reason people are thinking the same way you are and are scared to play someone like Rozier, I think that would make him really interesting in this game.
Yeah. All right. Brooklyn at Toronto. Kevin Durant, I don't care what the ownership projection is. Just jam him in. He got 53 DK points the other night in 28 minutes. We have been projected as a value at 29.5 minutes. Were he to play an extra rotation, so 31 minutes, 32 minutes, basically, I mean, then he goes from being a good value on this slate to playing a stone cold jam. Remember, he played off the bench. So he played 28 minutes off the bench for the Nets in the last game. If he starts, do you change the minute projection? Is this projection you have in right now, assuming him starting?
Yeah, it's just not going to change either way until Brooklyn tells us that he's off of this minutes limit. I mean, Nash just came out the other night and said they just weren't going to play him 30 plus. And then he didn't even start. But if he were to start, I'm still going to project the same. But I still think he's in a playable range. Challenge, I think, in the slate is we do have some quality studs at the very top. And KD just doesn't quite project there because of this minutes limit that he has. But it doesn't mean that he can't beat them if there's some failure on some of those studs. So I do have interest there. I think Kyrie he's expensive. That's the challenge. He's getting priced for when KD wasn't there. But I think if the ownership is really low, maybe you could give that a stab. I can't imagine. I mean, who else are you seriously considering on the Brooklyn side? Maybe DeAndre Jordan.
No, they get totally ruined by the return of Kevin Durant because they're just because the way it works is Joe Harris has a 17% usage rate, but doesn't do anything else. So he's unplayable when Durant's back in at this price. Jeff Green is not going to use the ball in offense. Blake Griffin's minutes get limited when Kevin Durant is healthy. He's at, 24 minutes or whatever. So, and they play 10 guys, especially now that they have Mike James in there, stepping around. So I would say probably Kyrie in tournaments would be the way I would view the Nets, because we're going to get single-digit ownership on him. You're going to have a minutes-limited Kevin Durant as fairly chalky in big tournaments. And obviously Kyrie has 60-point fantasy ceiling, any given night. So I think that's probably the right way to play the Nets. On the Toronto side, they are still without Chris Boucher, but they have their guard rotation back. Van Vliet, Lowry, Flynn, Hood, Gary Trent Jr., still not back for them, but Malachi Flynn and DeAndre Bembry are basically just filling in for those minutes. Then they, without Boucher, I thought that they would play more 3-guard lineups, but they've actually gone the other way, and they're playing a true center a bunch. They're playing Freddie Gillespie and Kem Birch a ton. Combined, we have them projected for 44 minutes. So that does not give a ton of room for Siakam to play backup center. Now, Birch, his game logs are fascinating. He literally just gets 23 DK points every single night, like almost regardless of what's going on. I do think he is an interesting little tournament stab, Kem Birch, 4,700. He's getting priced to a little bit more fair. And then the other guy is Anunoby, because if Anunoby ever has a night where he scores 20 real points, he can just go ham on DK because he does everything else so well. And they play him huge minutes now without Boucher. And they are playing for the play-in at this point. Like they were kind of like dusting it off. But they are they are loosely in the running for the Eastern Conference, so they're just still playing these guys full minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. For the longest, I thought that they weren't playing for the play-in. It seems like there's something weird is going on there.
It's very weird. You're right.
It is very weird. Something we spoke about on the show yesterday. It seems like the organization was trying to get a draft pick this season, but I don't think Nurse is ready to hang it up type of thing. Yesterday, again, the starters played over 30 minutes. And if the game was more competitive towards the end, maybe you could have seen even bigger minutes. I would like to see their 5:30 injury report because I have a feeling that maybe they could rest a guy if they're just really just hanging it up. That's what they were doing as of recent in these back-to-back. So, some caution there. If you're telling me, hey, these guys are playing for the play-in tournament, they really want to make it, and we're talking about 36 minutes for all these dudes, the core four. I think they become really interesting in this slate. Really, really interesting. It's not that we're going to get a report out of them that they're going to play those minutes, but I think if they're not resting, I think that's a good indication that they're trying to play them and play them their regular minutes. And I think they'd be really interesting at that point. Not saying I've played multiple of them or anything like that, but it's a good matchup against Brooklyn. And I think they might get a little bit under-owned in the slate, especially on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I still think they're going to get owned. But on DraftKings, some stabs on those core four guys make sense. I think Birch makes more sense on FanDuel than on DraftKings because of the stock upside that he has on FanDuel. On DraftKings, as you said, it's like a 23. And is that enough for you to win a tournament tonight? Maybe. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you're right. Maybe. We'll find out. All right. Don't have anything else on this game. Minnesota at Houston. Neither of these teams have anything to play for, but Houston is so bad that we're receiving good projections for all of Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell, Jaden McDaniels. Cat, I think, seems like a great play here. Edwards probably the most interesting because he's coming in at the lowest projected ownership and the highest leverage. McDaniel's also pretty interesting at 3,600, but playing as a starter with Cat, Edwards, and Russell, just he's not going to get a ton of the ball.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's it's kind of a Birch play, but at a much cheaper price. So I mean, there's really no difference. There's barely any difference because it's the same situation for Birch. He's not going to get touches in that offense. So perhaps upside is limited, but 3,600 seems like a much better price. He's probably going to get some ownership at that level. Minnesota really hasn't. Yeah, they haven't given us anything yet. And their total's 118, so it doesn't seem like Vegas is expecting them to rest anybody. And if that is the case, yeah, I mean, you have to like this matchup against Houston is fantastic for all of these dudes. Houston defensively is just horrible. Same for Minnesota. So it's a good matchup for Houston too. It's a big reason why the totals are so crazy in this game. I think you can do Cat, you can do D'Angelo Russell. I think I like Anthony Edwards less, but that guy also gets less ownership than the other two. So I think you can sprinkle some of that too. You mentioned McDaniels. I think he's fine. That's probably where I would stop on Minnesota, and I probably would do a max 2 on them.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the Houston side of the ball. Got a bunch of guys here who are popular, but bad leverage plays. Christian Wood, Kelly Olynyk, Kevin Porter Jr., and sort of Jae'Sean Tate. I guess they will probably start. Who do you think they'll start next to those 4 guys? Will it be Brooks or House?
It should be Brooks. It should be Brooks. We'll see about House, but
yeah, not great. So I guess out of Wood, Olynyk, and Porter, probably the one you'd have to like for tournaments the most would be Olynyk, because he should be I don't know. Is Olynyk going to be more owned than Christian Wood? I guess probably. I would like whoever is the lowest owned out of the two bigs, and then Kevin Porter Jr. Either way, I don't feel strongly about Kevin Porter Jr.
The challenge with the conversation you're having here is that it seems like Ollie's going to get more ownership because of the disparity in price tag on DraftKings. And then he's center eligible on both sites, but on DraftKings you can play two. So, and then on FanDuel, Wood is power forward and Olynyk is center. So Wood has to get more ownership over there as well. Listen, I know Kevin Porter Jr. is really inefficient at times, but the opportunity set on this fella without John Wall is insane. Insane. He's going to have some really big games. The thing is, it seems like he's going to get owned at these price tags, and on FanDuel it seems like massively owned. So you know what I mean? It's dicey because this slate does have some other values to it, some other studs to it, and you can still run into a game where Porter has like 30 FanDuel points, and that's probably not enough. So I think the upside is immense. He's going to struggle on this like medium projection because it seems like it's all or nothing on this guy. But you got to consider him in this slate without John Wall. His assist rate is near 40% without John Wall this season. So has the ball in his hands a lot.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our final game of the night, which is unquestionably the biggest game of the night. It's also, unfortunately, the last game of the night, so you're not going to know with a ton of time to get your swaps in. Luka Doncic, questionable, massive projection on Tim Hardaway Jr., and even though these guys don't have great projections right now, I do think Brunson, Kleba, Willie Cauley-Stein, some of those guys are good MME darts regardless. And then obviously if Luka doesn't, I guess the question is, if Luka doesn't play, do they just full white flag it? Jalen Brunson, not like, do they do what the Bucks do when they rest Giannis and literally rest the entire starting five? Like, that's a little interesting.
It's in play. It's very much in play. They already ruled out two starters, and the other three are questionable. So that scenario is definitely out there. Jalen Brunson, he has to get flagged already, like as a guy that will definitely be a play if Luka doesn't play. He will be starting. His rates are going to be bigger. I think he'd be really, really interesting for sure. My hope, frankly, is that the scenario that you said is what happens, and we don't find out until later. But yesterday we found out at 5:30 for these Dallas guys. We found out early. So if that's the case, everyone's going to be able to, make their swaps in, right? Adjust everything. If this thing happens late, it's going to be much more difficult, and it's going to carry more risk too, because this is the last game of the night. There are no swaps after that, Davis. So I think that would be a really interesting scenario. But Brunson is the guy you should be targeting in that event, that they rest more guys. I think Trey Burke, frankly, is another guy that I have my eye on. Yesterday he had a big game, so maybe people would want to be chasing that, but not right now with all these dudes questionable. No one's going to be chasing him. But I think he'd probably be in line for something like 20 to 23-ish minutes if they rest all these dudes. So that's another one I have my eye on. Tim Hardaway Jr. is already going to pop because there's no Josh Richardson. So he's already going to be slated to play 28 to 30 minutes. And if he's making shots, I think he can play 34 to 35. Yeah,
I'm with you. So I guess probably the GTO way to play this in tournaments is, what do you think? Like min one Maverick and then leave it up to the late swap, like, because obviously we have the late swap tool. I also wonder if Luka does play. I wonder if Luka. Well, I guess the problem with Luka being underowned is he just has been bad for fantasy. Like he just has not. He just really has not been good. I mean, maybe you say, and his rates would be improved a little bit without Porzingis, but I guess you can leave yourself with the solace if you are leaving these things for a late swap, and that You can play Curry, obviously. You can play Oubre.
Yeah.
You can play Jordan Poole. Like you're not drawing completely dead because there are some guys who are playable on Golden State. And I guess maybe you plan your swaps around. Okay, I move Curry I move Doncic to Curry, and then I leave another roster spot open to play, Maxi Kleber or whatever backup guard you like on the Mavericks. I don't know. I mean, whoever wins 100K on DK tonight is going to have a good handle on what to do with the Mavericks late swap stuff. But again, you're right. It might not matter, right? It really might not matter if we get this news early.
Yeah, it won't matter if we get the news early. The only thing up for grabs would be like who starts in Dallas. But we've seen this scenario play out before. No Luka, no Porzingis. Like Brunson dates back to last season that Brunson is the automatic starter for no Luka. So I would feel really great about that. Tim Hardaway Jr. would start. Frankly, probably Melly starts in the scenario that all these dudes rest. So it would become very straightforward if we get these news early. If we don't, there's still a chance that we get them by 8:30. And at that point, Davis, you also have the Minnesota-Houston game to swap to. So it's not just the Dallas Golden State game. If we get it at 8:30. If we get it beyond that, it's going to be a little bit more troublesome. But as you said, you still have Curry to swap to, Jordan Poole, Kelly Oubre, Draymond Green on Golden State. Definitely playable dudes over there. So I don't think it would kill you if you just waited. And I think the way the slate is setting up feels like a lot of people are going to lock in the early guys. Especially Jalen Brown, Marcus Smart. Those dudes are just so straightforward that people are going to want to lock that in early, and it makes all the sense in the world. But if we don't get these news at 5:30, I do think that the risk is worth the reward tonight with those Dallas guys, in my opinion. On the Golden State side, Curry, I think it's just great play here. Gonna play those 36 minutes if the game is competitive, maybe a little more, because this game means so much for Golden State. I think Draymond absolutely in a playable range. So I like those two. Don't like Andrew Wiggins in tournaments. I think Kelly Oubre's okay. Jordan Poole's okay. Juan Toscano Anderson, that's the dude that I wanted to talk about. 3,900 on DraftKings. Closed both halves last game. Essentially, they don't play Looney down the stretch.
Yep.
And they play JTA next to Draymond. And so I think he has upside into the 30s in that scenario. And he's really cheap on both sides. His rates are not going to be, crazy with him playing with the starters. But I think the playing time and the price tag make that dude very, very interesting. And that's another guy, by the way, that if the Dallas value doesn't work out, you can confidently swap to.
Yeah, I mean, you could even set it up where, like, let's say you have Luka and Juan Toscano Anderson. You can swap that to Curry, and I mean, pick your replacement Maverick of choice. You could do Jalen Brunson. You could do Maxi Kleber. You could do Josh Richardson. I mean, literally whoever. And the salaries are close to working out, or you could just structure it to play 3 guys from that game. Or a lot of people are obviously going to have Minnesota and Houston players. Like if you have Kevin Porter Jr., if you have McDaniels, if you have Karl Anthony Towns, there should be lots of swaps that you have access to. So I would definitely advise and encourage paying attention to that while you're building tonight.
Luka potentially being like 8 to, I don't believe this ownership projection on him, but 6 to 16, 17%. Not with the way this dude's shaking out for a long time now. Are you interested there at all at that potential 8 to 10 ownership range? Big game
in Luka Doncic. I mean, literally no player has cost me more money this year. Pacheco, like the night Dort got 55, I had Luka in. I literally think Luka got 42 in that game, and I just keep waiting for Luka to get there for me, because he's never, even on nights where he's chalky, like say in the big whatever $10 or $15 whatever it is, 100K to first, he's never over 25% anymore, because he really has not been great for fantasy, and he literally just it feels like he never gets there. Let's actually look at Luka's game logs real quick.
Yeah, you can look at it's the game log and the fact that his opportunity set it's not as great as it was.
There's just so many 43 pointers in there. Like his range of outcomes is much wider than it used to be. Like you could have just locked him in for 55 for like all of last season, and he just really has not been that guy for a little while here, which sucks.
Well, I kind of disagree. I think his range of outcomes has tightened up. And that's not good.
Yeah, well,
it's not good.
He doesn't have the 80 pointers sitting in there anymore. Yeah,
the 80, right. The 80, just the 70, 80. When did we see that last? And you compare it to his opportunity, and it's like, oh, this kind of just makes sense. I just wish, frankly, the price tag changed. That's the biggest thing here.
I mean, Zion's price tag changes all the time. He goes from 8,700 to 10,000 and then back down. But I just feel like the lowest Luka has been is like 10.2. But he never gets below 10,000.
Like he should. I mean, frankly, with a guy that his range of outcomes has been what it has been for so long, why is he not like 9,700? Or something like that. I think that would have made way more sense. I just keep hating on the price tag. That's my biggest issue with the guy. On top of the opportunity set not being as great as it was, and that's why I think the price tag should change.
Yeah. All right. I think that was a pretty good view of what people should do in the slate. Dort is the guy who I am going to boost the most in the projections, obviously. And then I think my plan in single entry 3 max is I'm going to try and play guard forward util on DK from the late games to leave room for swaps, to leave room for Jalen Brunson or whoever. I have a small feeling, a slight tremor in the force that Dallas does the Bucks thing and just rests all 5 of their starters. Don't take that as definitive. It's a gut feel.
Well, Vegas agrees with you because they only have a 108 total, and I'm telling you, yesterday it was at 114. They were favored by 1 on the opening line, so it feels like they know something's up or is going to happen there. Golden State's favored by like 7 points. No shot that would happen if Luka was playing here. James is asking if it's a blowout, do OKC leave their starters in? No, they'll still play like 10 guys. They typically don't extend it past that. They could extend it to 11, but they would have their bench if the game is like really, really out of hand. He also asked if this show is on every day. The answer is yes. It's on every day because we don't have short slates anymore. So from here on out, it's going to be on from Monday through Friday. We don't do videos on the weekend.
Yeah. All right, everyone. There we go. That's the slate, and we wish you great luck tonight.